Good evening, Bruins. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the second act. For those of you who have not had a chance to meet yet, my name is Julie Sina, and I have really what is an honor to serve as your alumni director. And as your alumni director, I want to say to you, I hope that you all enjoyed as much as I did hearing the marching band, and we're doing that A clap with me in spirit. I can't help myself every time that comes on. But I want to give you just a little bit of background on the second act. Again, I'm so pleased to have you in the space tonight. And I actually am in JWAC in the West Center. However, I'm not leaning over the railing. I'm actually in my office, and really look forward to us being together to have this conversation in person again, and to do that A clap together in person as well. We created the second act program really in response to you, to our alumni. Uh, Earlier, probably about 2013-14, we began what was a real revitalization and a look at our programs. And we started by focusing on, frankly, our young alumni, because 47% of our alumni under the age of 40. And we started to hear back from our second act, which our second act is our alums 50, 60, and above, saying, hey, don't forget about us. And we didn't. And you have responded so incredibly well. So all of the programs we have done, since you think you've got another book in you, to a TED Talk, to a lot of programs around memory, have been because you've suggested them, including the one tonight. But we're going to spend some time talking about relaxation, recreation, and re-engagement post-COVID. I think one of the things among many that we could agree on is just how much our lives have collectively changed over the last several years. The pandemic, everything going on in the world. And we find ourselves where we're talking a whole lot more about self-care, about our mental health, about how we build that community for us, for our families, because we've spent so much of it in isolation. And so we're coming out of that now, hopefully, as we continue to take the precautions we need to take around being healthy and being safe. And so tonight we want to talk about how that reinvention is coming for us post-COVID in terms of how we're relaxing, how we're recreating, how we're re-engaging. And we have three wonderful panelists. As I told them a couple minutes ago as we were prepping, I feel like this hour is going to fly by. There's so much I know that we want to talk about together. So here's how we're going to roll tonight. I'm going to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves to you, tell you a little bit about what they do and the programs that they're involved in. And then we're going to jump into it and have a conversation around how each of the work that they do and what they're doing personally to come out of that in terms of re-engaging in this space around recreating and reconnecting and relaxation. So that's the plan for the hour. As you have questions, there's going to be some directions in the chat so you can submit them, and we'll do our very best, as we always do, to get to as many questions as we can. And as always, hoping that this is much of a conversation and a dialogue as possible. And as you have ideas based on what you hear in terms of what you'd like to see upcoming conversations be about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So ready? Let's jump in and get going. So let's start with Wendy. Wendy, welcome you to come on camera, and love for you to talk a little bit, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the fabulous program you have.
Thank you so much, Julie, for including me in this amazing panel. And I'm so glad to be here, and hello, all Bruins on camera or off camera. Before I get started, I'd love us all to just connect our mind and body by taking 2 deep breaths in and out if you want, and think about one thing we're grateful for. And I'll just lead that. Okay, thank you. So I am the Associate Vice Provost of the Semel Healthy Campus Initiative Center at UCLA. I'm also the clinical professor. I'm a clinical professor in the Schools of Medicine and Public Health. And I have been in the good fortune of leading the Semel Healthy Campus Initiative Center for 8 years. And for those who don't know much about the Semel Healthy Campus Initiative, it was building on the accomplishments of the Semel Institute's groundbreaking work over 10 years ago that Jane and Terry Semel proposed their vision to Chancellor Block about HCI, which is what we call the Semel Healthy Campus Initiative. And they gave their support to create the healthiest campus in the country for the over 85,000 students, staff, and faculty, and of course, alumni, who learn, work, and live on campus every day. And Jane and Terry's idea was simple. We were doing a really good job treating disease at UCLA, but we weren't doing such a good job promoting health and preventing disease. And so the goal of our SEML HCI is to promote health and well-being, which means emotional, social, and physical well-being, while we build a whole culture of health and equity. And since our inception, the SEML HCI inspired then President Napolitano to launch the Global Food Initiative, the Healthy Campus Network, which is now modeling HCI on all the other 9 campuses, as well as Michelle Obama, a former First Lady who actually just launched a healthier campus initiative based on our model, which is exactly what Jane and Terry Semmel wanted to do it well in our own backyard and inspire others. And I know for today's talk and panel, and I'll pass it on back to Julie, I'm going to focus on the work that we've done around social well-being, which is really important because, as Dr. Chris Dunkelstetter, one of our esteemed professors who leads our Engage Well pod, she said that if you have poor social well-being, it's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So I'll stop there and I'll share more about how we can combat that in other ways.
Well, I think that last statement certainly got our attention, Wendy. I also want to acknowledge that, do I have this right, that you're the founding director?
Well, I actually was preceded by Michael Goldstein, who is now an emeritus professor in the School of Public Health. He retired after 2 years of really launching.
That's right. The launch of it.
Yeah, the social movement and the community organizing part. But thank you for acknowledging him as well.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I remember very well the work that he did and the tremendous sort of campus assessment, which speaks to the social part, I think, that you're talking about in terms of the input here. But really have so much respect for the work that you do, Wendy. So thank you. Thank you for being here today. So Anna Shea, let's hear, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the group and tell us a little bit about your world.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. My name is Anna Shea Shayestapur. I'm sorry it's so hard to say, but you'll remember me that way. And I am the director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at UCLA, which is one of about 124 of these lifelong learning institutes across the nation that are supported in part by an endowment from the Bernard Osher Foundation. Our institute at UCLA is very much a mini version of UCLA. We allow people 50 and over to take our courses, to become members, and being a member allows you to have access to intergenerational volunteer opportunities and research opportunities connected to UCLA. So it's a wonderful way to stay engaged with the UCLA community. And we, of course, have our course offerings every quarter. Across all different types of content areas. We have one-day seminars, lecture courses, discussion groups, special interest groups, and even some experiential learning opportunities. So there really is something for everybody, and we really pride ourselves on being a very unique lifelong learning institute in the sense that we are shaped by my personal philosophy that education is a health issue. So a lot of the things Wendy was saying resonated with me. I am an educational psychology researcher, and I have found by learning about the psychology of education that there is a significant impact on social emotional well-being if you're actively engaged in learning, as well as a physical effect on the telomeres, which cap our chromosomes. So I'll get into that more later as well, but it's not just about having fun, it's about actually staying healthy and increasing your lifespan through transformative and meaningful education opportunities. And of course, because we are a lifelong learning institute, we're low cost, we're self-supported. So it really is a community of people who are here together wanting to stay engaged.
Well, thank you, Anna Shea. And I appreciate you making that same connection about just really how very real that impact is when we make the choices that you're talking about. And just to clarify, is the Osher Institute is housed in Extension?
Yes, we are part of UCLA Extension so that we can use the facility in Westwood, which is far more accessible and easier to get to. There aren't so many stairs and parkings right underneath for those who may have mobility issues.
You're speaking to our second act here. Crystal, I would like to invite you to introduce yourself and first of all, tell us where you are
Oh,
and
sure.
and a little bit about your world.
I wish I was saying I was coming from Sicily, but this is from Palermo, Sicily. I was there in March, so I thought this would be a fitting image for today. So hi, everyone. Very happy to be here with you this evening. My name is Crystal Aragon. I am the director of UCLA Alumni Travel, and a wonderful program that was founded all the way back in 1941. So we've been around for a while, not me, but the program. And today we plan international tours, about 50 of them spanning the whole globe. Anything from an Shakespeare festival up in Ashland, Oregon, an extended weekend filled with theater, to a trip to Antarctica and everything in between. I love what I do, working with our alumni, friends, and family. And I also work with many of our lecturers, our UCLA professors that go on many of our tours to kind of make them UCLA exclusive and unique. And the majority of our travelers are ages 50 and above, with the average age being 63.
Very young people. That's very young.
Really, that's right. I love this audience. And we have a lot of women travel with us because it's a safe group environment. We have a lot of tours with no single supplement. So it's just really been wonderful you don't have to be a couple to travel on our tours. Everyone's welcome. So really learning through travel, and travel is back. I mean, in 2021 calendar year, we had 300 travelers. This year, we're already at 900. So you can see the huge jump in bookings. And for 2023, we'll probably be at around 1,200. So already back to, pre-COVID levels. So if you're thinking about traveling, don't delay, book soon. We're back. So
thank you so much, Crystal. And we will get into some more questions specific about the various areas that each of you come from. But I'd like to start off with just a couple of very general questions and welcome anybody to jump in and to follow up on it. And first, even though I know we're here tonight to talk about this emergence post-COVID, I would just be curious to hear from each of you. How did you manage during the COVID period when we talk about the notion of really engaging and taking care of oneself when it comes to recreation and relaxation? How have the last couple of years been for you, and what strategies have you emerged with? I know that's a lot to put out there for the first question. Anybody care to jump in and share their experience and their immersion?
Sure, I'll get us started.
Thank you, Anna.
So the very good question about how we transitioned during COVID. So you just asked where we're located in Westwood, but of course, when we hit the pandemic, everything went onto Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, we had no Zoom classes. So there was a huge learning curve. And one of the really positive things that came out of that is that we had an initial reaction from our audience, which they're 50 plus, a significant amount are over the age of 70 because they are retired.
Mm-hmm.
And people who were very resistant to even learning how to enroll online or conquering new technologies, who were able to live their lives without having to do any of that, who did not initially want to take courses online and thought, well, I'll just wait this out. We very soon realized that it was going to be a very long pandemic and we were needing to find things to keep us occupied. So the act of actually learning how to learn Zoom and go online was in and of itself such a transformative experience for so many of our students that there was this pride of being able to conquer that, insecurity, if you might say, something that they thought would be so hard to do, but really wasn't once you just learned how to do it. So that has shifted our entire way of programming. And we now have an audience of people who prefer online learning in many instances because of mobility issues, because of LA traffic, because now they can take the classes from anywhere. So we really have a whole different world in front of us. Because people come from all over the country now, we've been able to offer new programming, and the conversations that happen in classrooms are so different. And it's a lot less homogeneous of a population. So when you have that diversity, there's these natural connections that start being made. We have students who want to volunteer to do things that we never had that before. So in a lot of ways, it's been extremely positive. And I think the next question for me is just what's going to happen when it kind of goes back to a blended model. But for now, it's just really impressed me how much people are excited every quarter for the list of online classes to come out.
But
And the
Anushay,
ways
do you see it headed back to a blended model in terms of what you're doing?
I think that my personal thinking from what I've seen across extension is that I believe that the courses will be mostly online with opportunities to meet in person for socialization or having one or two meetings in person. I think there will be some sort of blend. Of course, there are people who would rather just stay with the in-person classes altogether, but they are becoming the minority. So we're going to have multiple options. And of course, the technology now is there to have the teacher in the classroom and also live stream that to Zoom. So that's something we're perfecting more each quarter.
Well, thank you. So again, the question I wanted to put out there was the last couple of years. You know, how did you, even personally,
Yeah.
deal with the issue of engagement and relaxation and you know, community, and what how are you emerging from that? Any Crystal or Wendy, either one of you want to comment on that?
Well, I would just want to say for UCLA Alumni Travel, very similar. We did a lot of information sessions and moved things online. And I was also so impressed with our travelers embracing this new technology and way of connecting. But the good thing that's come out of all this, all our pre-departure meetings now are on Zoom. So it doesn't matter if our travelers live in, you know, New York, they can still participate. So that's something that wasn't possible before. And really early on, I mean, I almost felt like I was a psychiatrist, you know, it's just all the travelers, they just had to call and talk and vent and all these canceled tours. And it was just so much to deal with that. But we take all the initial phone calls and we just would listen to our travelers, and we all went through it together. But I think it felt that connection of just talking to someone. So a lot of our travelers would just call us to talk, and that was fine. That's what we could do back then, right? So we're just trying to really be engaged with them as best we can, even though we're not meeting in person. But I will say the 600 travelers that now have traveled with us since last July, they have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think what we kind of took for granted before, this traveling whenever, now it's a treasure, it's a pleasure, and it's just, I hope that will stay for a little bit longer because it is so special. So that's something that we're taking away from this.
So Wendy, I'd like to maybe adjust the question a little bit for you. I'd be curious to see, you know, based on, you know, even when you were introducing yourself and you talked about really this focus on this building of community through this Healthy Campus initiative, what were your observations, you know, during COVID around how were you able to continue that when people were maybe a bit more isolated, and how do you see that coming out?
Yeah, well, what was really remarkable was because we did have the Healthy Campus Initiative and it was so well positioned in the Chancellor's office, which is where we're based. We were able to recognize within the first week of the sheltering at home, you know, shift that the Bruin Post needed to focus on emotional and social well-being. And the communications team and the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor, everyone was very on board with that. And because we have a team of experts that have been working on this holistically at UCLA together, we wrote two of the first Bruin posts in March related to that subject matter, and also physical, like, you know, ergonomics and things that people had to adjust to. So we realized, and not just us, I think the entire community has recognized how critical our social and emotional well-being is, and how interconnected we are, and also connected to our own physical well-being. And, you know, the data shows, this is not my expertise, so I've learned from my colleagues, but that strong connections have been found to make you live longer, have stronger immune systems, lower rates of anxiety and depression, and higher levels of empathy and self-esteem. So how did we help promote that? That's the question. One is we have a series, we've published over 40 podcasts, interviewing experts from UCLA predominantly, maybe one or two from outside our campus, but and they're accessible, they're free, they're on our website. I'll give that website link, as well as Apple. You can get it on your iPhone and so forth. But we interviewed people like Dr. Ted Robles, who's a specialist in social well-being, and he talked and he addressed the topic of isolation during a pandemic kind of experience. And so it gave people, I think, some of the skills that they needed. And in the middle of all this, I lost my father from COVID.
Mm,
And so bringing it to a personal matter, I really, 1 out of 3 Americans have lost a loved one to COVID. And my dad was 91. He was probably going to live to 100, and he died. And that really brought it to home for me and gave me what I do when I have things like that. It drove my purpose even more to give to others. And when I opened up my discussion of what I do, I had everyone take a deep breath and think about gratitude. Data shows that if you practice 15 minutes a day of gratitude, writing 5 things down that you're grateful for every day, write them down, 5 things, take 15 minutes. It shows there's been meta-analysis that have shown that it actually enhances your well-being and actually enhances your socialization with others. So it's just, these are the kinds of pieces of science that we can translate to practice for our community. And one more thing that was really telling, I think, of our leadership was that they identified that well-being and work expectations were critical for the COVID response and recovery task force. And I was asked to lead that working group that we led for over 2 years, or a little over a year and a half, meeting every other week, identifying with a diverse group of people from across the campuses to identify things like cave syndrome, which is where you have a hard time getting back into work or into the real world, so to speak, because of our isolation, and the mental health issues and the burnout issues. So all of these things, we've been able to tap all our expertise, and that's been I think, raised this awareness on our campus, where it was very heightened anyway, to another level.
yeah, thank you so much for Wendy. And I want to acknowledge and your loss. One of the things we had as Crystal knows, we had a retreat to start the school year. And I knew I wanted to do something very different than the let's set goals and strategy for the year, but just have some conversations about what it feels like to come back. And it ended up being a whole discussion around loss, because everybody has experienced that over these, and it feels like in a much heavier way, And I think the isolation, of course, is a part of that. And you also mentioned anxiety. I think that has also been a frequent topic of conversation and acknowledgement, and also want to acknowledge the messaging and really resonated with what you said, because did notice a real shift in the tone around that. So thank you for your leadership around that. I think that was definitely felt within our community. But staying with anxiety for just a moment here, or many moments. Crystal, I want to turn to you, because I think one of the things that you mentioned that I know is also real is the anxiety that people have about traveling and getting back out there. So can you speak to that some, and the advice that you and your team are providing around getting back out in the world?
Yeah, no, I mean, number one is that there's really no right or wrong. I mean, we all have different comfort levels, and just acknowledging that when we're talking to our travelers. I mean, if they're starting off asking, can I get out of this? I mean, then I would ask them, are you sure you want to book this? Because it's just, and then also there's different modes of travel, right? There's cruises versus land programs. Right now, people are feeling more comfortable with land. Also group sizes, how many people are going to be on the trip with them? Is a domestic trip perhaps better versus international? So we have all these discussions, and I'm never going to put someone on a trip if they're not comfortable, because that's a no-win for nobody, right? So it's just talking to the travelers. And I will say that anything with sort of outdoors, Iceland, Galapagos, national parks, it's selling really, really well right now, and probably will continue for quite a while. If you've been to a national park in the last couple of years, you've seen the difference in crowds. And then cruising will probably take some time to come back. And, the big ship cruising, 1,000 travelers and above, I don't think they'll really rebound to 24 or 25. The people are going, but it's not what we saw before. So yeah, it's just listening and having a broad, diverse offering, so that there's something for everybody. I think that's really, really important.
So what, speaking specifically about air travel for a minute, because we've seen, of course, You wear masks, you don't wear masks. The airports, are fairly crowded. You have vaccine checks, you don't have vaccine checks.
Yeah.
So how do you talk people through that in terms of expectations, particularly around safety and proximity, if you will?
Right. Well, the first thing we say is that this is how it is today. It might change tomorrow. I have my pre-departure meetings
And
now.
let's acknowledge that that's been a cause of anxiety for
Yeah,
folks too,
I
right?
know. But so
It's
we have
across the world.
pre-departure meetings a week before departure, and I've still have had to call travelers and emails travelers back and said, oh, by the way, this has now changed. Now, the good thing right now is that the changes are very positive. I'm sure you know, as of June 12th, you don't need to have a negative COVID test to get back home. That was a major anxiety for a lot of our travelers because you don't want to get stuck in a foreign country and having to, pay all these hotel costs, possibly medical, even though most people don't even know they're sick. They know because they have to test, right? So that's gone away now. So we've had a very, very busy week. And another trend we're seeing is people are either booking really, really far out. So I'm talking fall 2023. Or I had a woman call me on Friday wanting to join our Sicily trip that left yesterday because now she felt comfortable traveling. So that didn't quite work out, but it's either really far out or close to. And one way that our tour operators have responded to this is that many, many companies offer full refunds, no questions asked, up to 90 days prior to departure. Like, okay, this trip is October 23, you can get out of it next summer. And people really want that flexibility. They want to know, because of what we all went through, right? In the spring of 2020, I'm sure we all had trips and things lined up that got canceled. And then there was all the challenge of getting all those money back, right? So that's a positive change that a lot of airlines, Airbnbs, tour operators are doing that right now. So enjoy it. I don't think it's going to last forever, but it is in place for 2023.
So you heard that. That's Crystal's prediction on the future there for travel. So Crystal, one more question, and Anna Shea, I'm going to come back to you. Is the other focus I've heard from folks traveling in the anxiety area is just the variance of what's going on and how various countries are handling the pandemic. So how do you talk through that with folks?
Well, I mean, we just heard today, for example, that New Zealand is dropping their COVID testing requirements. And, New Zealand was closed. They just opened up, and they were very, very strict. I mean, they would have closed down the whole country if they got one case. So it's just such a fluid experience. And it's so hard to keep on top of, right? Because we're dealing with all these different areas and countries. And but there's some trends. Europe has been without the testing for a while now, and that gives some peace. But I just returned from Ireland 3 years ago, and I didn't see one mask. I mean,
you mean Ireland 3 years ago or 3 months ago?
No, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago, okay.
I was in Ireland, and no one wears masks over there. So it's just when you're coming from LA, it's a little bit getting used to. But I personally will always wear a mask on an airplane right now. And I think I will also say I haven't had a cold in the last year, because I used to get sick on planes just from colds. And, I think it's wonderful that you can wear a mask now at the airports and people don't look at you're sick, right? But it's, we've had a few COVID cases out of those 600 travelers. It's mostly been for people that have extended on their own and been in big cities, or that they've gotten it on flying home. It hasn't been on our trips because everyone has to be fully vaccinated and boosted, and we control it as best as we can. But obviously, we can't guarantee that you're not going to get it, just like anywhere, right?
Yeah. Well, and Crystal, I think, you made a really good point there in terms of the mask wearing. I think we've learned a whole lot about respecting how people care for themselves, right, over the last couple of years as well. So, Anna, I'm curious, given you talked about the number of courses, two questions for you. Have you made adjustments around the kinds of courses that you're offering, since the experiences we've had over the last couple of years? And just out of curiosity, what are the most popular things that you see among your constituents?
Great question. So we used to have a lot of film courses. Those were very popular, and unfortunately, transmitting a film through Zoom is not really a good idea, and it's not really possible, actually. So one of the ways we kind of had to figure that out, because when we had no film classes at all happening, there was this sense of something was missing. So now we have programs where we have a movie club where you watch the movie at home on Netflix the night before, and then you meet up to talk about it. And it's been such an amazing experience to be a part of, because you really do feel like you're back in the classroom having those conversations. And the second question you had was about which classes are most popular. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, we do have a lot of interest in the lecture courses. So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it's a non-credit program. So it's just learning for fun. You don't have to do any readings or do any assignments or anything like that.
How about exams? Do we have any
No
exams?
exams, no tests. So that's like why it's so much fun to come to our program. But really, the lecture classes where you sit and you get to listen to an expert, I think that people really enjoy those, and just being able to ask questions at the end. I do know something that people have told me who are in the discussion groups. They actually think it's easier on Zoom than it is for a small group. So that was a interesting outcome as well.
So tell us a little bit about your faculty. Where do your faculty come from in terms of who's teaching and who's lecturing?
We have a lot of retired UCLA professors or adjunct faculty members. We also have professors who have retired from other universities locally. When we have some experts in their fields, like one of our teachers who I always brag about is Dr. John Snibbe, who was a psychiatrist who worked with the LAPD on their mobile crisis units, and he's giving all these talks on mass shootings right now. So we tend to have somebody, or we can pull in somebody who's an expert on something happening if it is coming up in the news. And I think that is kind of what sets us apart from some of the other lifelong learning institutes. We have a very UCLA-like standard for excellence. So mostly older retired professors, but we do also invite some of the graduate students from campus who are really, they just have a knack for teaching. If they don't have a teaching background, they're just good at it. And people give presentations on their dissertation research or topics related to that. So that's also a way to kind of keep you involved in what's going on in terms of the research here.
So again, just to clarify, I think you said this earlier, but want to make sure that we're clear about this. Is it a blend right now of in-person and virtual?
So we do run a handful of in-person courses since the start of 2022. There may be 5 or 6 a quarter, and then I would say about 45 online classes. So in the fall, we're going to have, that number is going to go up a little, and we're going to try to broadcast all the in-person classes that are lecture classes to Zoom as much as possible. And it's a bit of a pilot in the fall, so we'll see how that goes. And like Crystal said, it'll depend on the situation, because with the older population, there are different concerns about being in person. So we're not in as much of a rush to get back to the classroom, but we are hoping fall will be some sort of a hybrid.
Well, it sounds like what I'm picking up from you also, Anna Shea, is that you're also just listening to your constituents and seeing what people are comfortable with. So I think that's terrific. So Wendy, I want to ask you, maybe get into a little bit more some program specific questions if I could. And one is, if you could just talk a little bit about what resources are available to help to maintain a healthy social, emotional, and physical well-being, and really what does that mean, healthy?
Right. So the two questions, the first part, actually, I just put 2 resources into the chat. One was the link to our podcasts with all our experts, really sort of building on what Anusha said about how we have such an incredible wealth of knowledge on our campus that we can really learn from and share. And sometimes people who might be experts in one area actually are really knowledgeable about something else. As an example, Dr. Bob Bilder, Semel Institute, he focuses on creativity, but he also really understands the health and well-being relationship between music and the brain and the well-being of that. And he even gave a talk to Herbie Hancock and their wonderful jazz graduate students about this topic. So that is, and there's a podcast interviewing him on that subject. It's really great.
Well, let me just say, I thank you for those podcasts because they've helped me on many a walk.
Oh, did they? Oh, that's such great news. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. And there's also a UC Irvine has a One Mind Cyber Guide website, and I can put that in the chat as well. Basically, I think we're all it's hard to filter apps. We do well-being apps, like we don't really know what really works, what doesn't work, is it commercial, is it based in science? And so that's what they do. They actually rate apps, and I'm going to put that in that's the link to it. And then there's a nice guide. It's a little bit more technical and it has a lot of resources, but I put it in, it's a CDC guide that helps you, which is something that our researchers who deal with trauma in children have taught people how to actually assess your own mood. So like with almost like a thermometer, you can use, and every day you can sort of say, okay, where's my mood today? Anyway, that's what they've done with different topics like anxiety, depression. And it's not a diagnostic tool. It's more like, how are you feeling? Recognize how you feel. And then you can click on the box and it will take you to CDC resources and other vetted resources that they've, and it's meant for the general public. It can be used also for professionals as well, but also the general public. There's resources for everybody. So that was the first part of the question, which was a little easier to answer. What was the other part? I forgot.
It's just, as you talk with, perhaps the community that you support is, how do you help people think through what does it mean to be healthy?
Right. So that's great.
In this sense, not so much the physical sense.
Right. Well, everyone defines it differently, and that's part of our, we have a set of values that are built on Bruin values, true Bruin values. And one of them is really honoring people's culture and their sense of who they are and what they believe in, and their ability to define what they think is a healthful body and mind and habits and everything. So what we try to do is by building a culture of health, what it really means is valuing health, like looking at everything and always remembering that there's a piece of something that you should always be saying, what is the impact on someone's health on this policy, for instance? Or what is it that, so we pitched and actually have a 12th section now in the UC Office of the President's Sustainability Policy that is a well-being and health and equity section. And we have just spent a year with faculty student pairs evaluating each of the sections, looking at what are the unintended consequences that are positive and negative of that particular policy. Because sometimes you might have a policy that's really good for Mother Earth, but maybe it's not so good for some people. As an example, for a long time, eating organic was really expensive. So is that really open for everybody? Now we know, Walmart is #1 seller of organic vegetables and fruit now. So it's become more accessible, but for a long time it wasn't. So, you have to think about these kinds of consequences. One thing that our transportation director, who just retired, Renee Fortier, said was so great for her is that she could use health to incentivize people to do active transport, not Mother Earth incentivize. So people get incentivized by different things. So for instance, if you adopt active transport, which means anything but your single occupied car, if you can do some, like take the bus or take, walk or take the subway or bike, that those will, within a year, just by doing more active even the bus, you lose 10 pounds. Because the single occupancy car is just so isolating physically and actually emotionally. It's also been it also shows less poor social well-being outcomes, which is a concern right now, right? Because of the people sort of shifting back to single occupancy cars because they're afraid of public transport.
Yeah, that's kind of how we rolled in LA for a long time, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
But I also want to take back, I think when I said the question, when I asked you the question, I said separate from physical, but I think both you and Anna Shea have so beautifully talked about how indeed they are linked in terms of how taking time and taking care of yourself can also have an impact there too. So
Yes,
I
that's
take
right.
that back.
Ah,
So
it's all
uh,
interconnected.
it's all
We
together, all
that,
together.
yeah.
So Anusha, good questions come in for you from our audience. And one of the what they want to know is, what this individual wants to know is, do you have programs in OSHR that are available for non-English speakers?
We have foreign language classes, but not necessarily programs for non-English speakers. But we are very responsive. So if there is a demand for something, let me know and I can make it happen within a quarter or two.
Mhm.
So
That's pretty fast.
yeah, I like to get things done. So unfortunately, with the pandemic, we had 2 weeks to pivot to Zoom. So we now are in that mindset of let's just get things going. So I'm open to new ideas. Hasn't been requested before, but definitely open to it.
Okay, well, there's somebody out there that you may be hearing from.
Great.
And again, I think you mentioned this at the start, but I just want to go back for clarification around cost.
So we are a membership-based program, which means you pay a $50 annual membership fee. And we do have one-day classes where you don't need to be a member. You just pay $15 for that one class. But when you are a member, you get access to signing up for the multi-week courses. The lecture courses I mentioned, there's history, science, literature, there's all the subject areas. And those run anywhere from 100 to 120 a piece for the quarter. And then we do have the discussion groups, the yoga, the drawing, the creative courses, the mahjong, all those kind of classes that are smaller groups are $80 a piece. We also have a higher tier of membership called Plus membership. You pay $295 a year and your courses get cut down to $40 at most each. And we know that there's still some challenges for some people with even those prices. So we do have a scholarship program and there's plenty of funding available for people who are in need of funding.
You read my mind at the next question. And I think I'm reflecting back, even Wendy, what you said a couple minutes ago is we really don't, hopefully we can be in a space and a place within our community that our emotional health and well-being and our connection is not based on privilege, right? That we find ways to find a place for everybody to find a way to connect and feel welcome at whatever table we're setting, right? So Crystal, a follow-up for you is, I know you talked about a number of your trips. Talk about for folks that are still kind of nervous about being together, what are some of the group sizes? How do they range in terms of the trips that you offer?
Well, this is one thing that definitely has changed in the last couple of years, is that we no longer have huge group sizes. Most of our tours are tapped at 24. That usually, unless you're on a cruise ship, but if you're on a group land tours, it's not going to be more than 24 people. And a lot of tours aren't going out full right now. So you might be on a trip with 12 other people. That could happen as well. So that has been something that I think is going to stay as well and positively received by our travelers. So yeah,
when I think even when you talk about cruise ships, a follow-up there's a, just because I'm a little familiar with your trips, there's a range of size.
Absolutely.
So talk about numbers there, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So for example, we have a trip going to Alaska in a couple of weeks. It's on a 66 passenger ship and you take that experience versus being on a Princess cruise line with 4,000, right? So, what we call big ship cruising with UCLA Alumni Travel, that would be, 800 travelers. But reality is 4,000 or 5,000 passenger ships are out there. And I personally would not get on one of those right now. So, but the majority of our cruise ships are between 100 to 200 travelers, which is just right, that they can kind of control the audience. It's open seating. Everyone gets to know each other. So we prefer the smaller cruise ships. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And Wendy, speaking of costs, are there costs or a range of costs for any of the programs that you offer?
No, we pretty much are working with all our partners. And so what we put on in terms of, like, say, our end of the year celebration, it's first come, first serve, but it's usually fits as many people as possible. And we always serve food, of course. The teaching kitchen, which you're familiar with, we were obviously very involved in the development of it and supporting it. And so that's available for students and different schools at the maintenance costs, nothing more than that, or the food and the like the facilities cost of cleanup.
So for those who don't know about the teaching kitchen, could you just tell? I think it's just so great.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah. Well, so just to give you a little background, in 2014, we had a food summit at UCLA where we had senior administrators like, EVC Provost Scott Waugh and vice chancellors and deans and faculty and students and experts around food to just think, what could we do? What could we imagine that would be great for our university around food? And we wrote a preamble of a page, giving academic rationale why UCLA should actually lead in this subject area in a transdisciplinary manner. And out of that meeting, we identified 5 steps. One was to create an undergraduate food studies minor, which we got done within 14 months, thanks to Joseph Nash, professor of English. And he actually ruined Hansel and Gretel for me, though, because he told me it's all about cannibalism. I didn't even know that. Anyway, but he's so knowledgeable and just amazing person. He led that. Then Dr. May Wang from the School of Public Health led the certificate, the graduate food studies certificate program. She got that done in 10 months. These are all record times because everyone was so excited and interested. And then one of the recommendations was to start a teaching kitchen. That took longer, especially pre-COVID. There wasn't much space around. But finally, our partner in recreation found the tennis centers staging for catering. We were able to transform that, and some of the money that came from the state to help with food security for our students helped pay for that, along with a very generous donation from Marcy Rothman, who's an alumni of, as we know, of UCLA, amazing person, chef herself, and Semele CI also contributed, and so did the recreation. And so that was really focusing on addressing food security, because our insecure students identified not only did they want access to more food, access and availability to healthy, delicious food, but they wanted to know how to prepare it.
Yeah.
And so this was our effort to create a living laboratory for those students and also for the health professional students, of which I do a lot of education of those. And I know firsthand how little nutrition education you get in medical school, having actually spent a year before I went to medical school to study nutrition for a year. So in master's program, so that I would be prepared. So that, and then the other pieces, so that was the teaching kitchen. Then also the Jane B. Semmel Community Garden was also a dream that came true. In the Sunset Rec area, there's 32 raised beds that are biodynamic. They're not even organic earth, it's biodynamic earth. And they can be adopted by student, staff, faculty, and alumni. And every summer they go up for adoption for the summer. And then in the school year, you get to adopt them during the entire academic year. So those all happened. And the biggest pie in the sky was to have a food studies institute. And that just got launched this year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And mentioning alumni kind of is one of the last questions I have for you, which is, I know this is a university community effort. How can alumni participate in the work that you're doing?
We welcome all constituents, and we would love the alumni and we do have alumni that participate in what we have. So we believe in what's called a collective impact model, which is where we convene different groups of people focused on different areas to meet a goal, and they leave their personal agenda at the door, and they come in and they agree on a common goal, and they meet monthly. And so our regular meetings, there's a hiatus in the summer, but we resume in October, focused on, one's called Engage Well, which is a social well-being Eat Well, which is the food one, Be Well, which is built environment, Mind Well, which is emotional well-being, and then we have Research Well. And anyone can attend. It's inclusive, not exclusive. We have alumni attend. We have a lot of Meriti who are continuing since working with us, that they continue to participate. And then we also have fundraising. We have a development effort right now for endowed chairs. So for people who have maybe a loved one that they want to honor, endowed term chairs are not actually as high stakes as other kinds of endowments. So that's something else that we welcome, or small donations, because everything we do is, like we say, we're not, we don't charge, we're emanating out of the chancellor's office, and we do everything for the benefit of the entire campus.
Yeah. So I really want to emphasize that, folks, is, as Wendy's talking about that, we've been talking about the Healthy Campus Initiative, but it's a Brew and Healthy Community Initiative. So
That's right.
that is applicable to our alumni audience who's on the call right now. So and when we send out the follow-up email, we'll also put the links to not only the programs that Wendy leads, but also to OSHR and to the travel programs as well. So, the hour has really flown by for me. There's still so many questions I'd love to ask each of you. But what I would love to do is to give each of you a few minutes, and I can't, not a few minutes because then we're going to go over time. But I have one last question, of course, with a sub question to ask each of you. And, we gathered tonight to talk about how we're coming out of COVID in terms of re-engaging. So if you each could take very quickly talk about what's next from your point of view and the work that you do, but also advice to folk about getting back out there in terms of, and what that means in terms of recreation and relaxation and that building of community, Wendy, where you started. So what's next in the areas that you're leading, and advice. So Crystal, I'm gonna call on you first, if I could.
Okay. Well, I think what next is just, if you haven't traveled, just know that it's okay, and you do what's good for you, even if it means just going somewhere here, in whatever city you're in, right? It's traveling. So, and maybe brew yourself a big cup of coffee and spend some time on our website, because we have 91 trips up there. And if nothing else, I hope it will inspire you and maybe give you some ideas of places to go and places to see. I mean, we definitely have seen an uptick in sort of the trips of a lifetime. People just don't want to wait to do those anymore, an African safari or whatever. So if you're thinking about doing any travel in 2023, I would just say get on it, because it's getting tight. Space is selling out. So just don't procrastinate if there's something you want to see and do, and call us. We'd love to talk to you, even if you're just looking for some advice. We will be happy to give that and do that. And don't be afraid. It's okay to travel. It's going to be fine. So
and again, we'll get that information out to you. So Crystal, what's your bucket list place to go? Where haven't you been yet that you're going to go?
Japan would be mine. That was my trip in April of 2020. We all had that one trip, right? That never happened. Yeah. So
okay, Anna Shea, from your perspective, what's next, and a word of advice?
I think what's been discovered and what's coming next is that it's important to stay healthy after you hit 50, or even after retirement. I think that COVID kind of reminded everybody how important our health is. And then what we've talked about today, just the idea of the knowledge being spread out more, that being healthy means being intellectually stimulated as well as physically stimulated. So I think that that's really just going to keep growing, and it's going to become more accepted as people are living longer and want to make sure they stay healthy far into their hundreds, maybe one day. So
I like the way you think, Anna Shea. Wendy.
Well, I think this panel that you convened, Julie, is just a perfect example of, so Crystal and Anna Shea have opportunities for the audience to be able to engage and become more socially engaged with others. And I think that is going to be huge for everyone's well-being moving forward. I also have to share that there's a looming challenge for all of us, which is media and information literacy. And we know that this is something that is really can impact your health very negatively. we held a summit, just like the food summit 3 months ago on this subject, and had the senior editor of New York, the LA Times speak, and neuroscientists, and the executive vice chancellor provost. I mean, there's a lot of data that shows how it can impact your physical, emotional well-being, and so that's an area we're going to have. Basically, after that summit, we decided we need to do a much longer, in-depth summit. So we welcome people who are on this call who are interested in this subject to help us figure out what to do about it. And then in terms of how just moving forward, I think art and storytelling and the enjoyment of nature and the sense of awe, those are the areas that we all have control over. And a lot of Maya Angelou's work that she writes, I love. Like, she has this statement, like, I love this day and I've never seen it before. And that
Well, thank you
in one
so
of
much,
us.
Wendy. That is and returning to the place that you started, which is gratitude. So grateful to you and to Crystal and to Anna Shea for spending your afternoon with us, or evening. We'll get all of that information back out to you. And you all have given us also some ideas for some panels coming up. So please do send your ideas. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us. Thank you to Christine and Brian from our network team for putting this together and launching us today. Keep your ideas coming, stay well, and go Bruins. Thank you.